Endpoint isolation is no laughing matter to system admins. In fact, at home, in my office, I actually have a machine, my Synology box, that runs several containers running my browsers because I'm so worried about those browsers getting owned and then having visibility into my network. Well, that setup is not very practical for most people, so instead, if you're running an enterprise, why not speak to the folks at Bromium, because they've got a way to use Micro VMs to protect your network. I'm speaking with Simon Crosby. Simon, what is a Micro VM?
A Micro VM is an isolation construct built using Intel VT and other security features on the CPU like SGX to isolate a single task on the end user operating system. So for example, every single tab of my browser, or perhaps every document I get which is an attachment to my email, files from a USB key, anything you send me via Skype or Twitter, they're all independently hardware isolated from each other and from the operating system.
This is not a new methodology. We've had this around for a while. I could always run a VM on my box and bring it up and then run whatever it is that I'm questioning and see what it does. But the issue has been resources. I don't want to sit there and wait 3 minutes for a VM to spin up before I can actually get into the file. What have you done to make that less of a drag on my time?
Oh, that's a great question. So for me, a Micro VM is 15 milliseconds, okay? So on that, and that's on a Core i3 or i5 or i7 CPU. So what's happening here is we're doing an instant in-memory fast clone of Windows or Mac OS, depending on whichever you're running. And then essentially there are a couple of other memory pages that are pinned there, but basically we're taking the page table state from the CPU, marking it all as read-only, putting it into a new Intel VT VMCS, and we have a new VM which is running. And then as it runs, it's going to execute CopyOnWrite. And what that means is that if it changes any memory locations in user mode or in the kernel, those are going to be changed in its own memory context. So we'll copy stuff in, the hypervisor does this, and then it changes its own state. So I'll give you an analogy for that. If I put you in the top of a very tall building and say, can you change the city skyline, but I give you a dry erase pen, you can scribble on the windows, okay? So that's CopyOnWrite. You're changing things, but not really. And so these things execute a task, one task only. It might be a browser renderer, it could be a Word document or something, PDF doc, and there are amazing benefits that accrue. First of all, because there's only one task in the Micro VM, we get to be able to analyze its behavior in excruciating detail. We record every packet it sends or receives, every touch on memory, on the virtual file system, on the registry, and whether we know that it's good or bad, we do this. And so then we can look for deviations from good. Rather than looking for bad, which is the problem of antivirus today, you look for deviations from good. So if it just behaves weirdly, I just start to send all of these forensic details up to security team, to the SOC, and we do this in real time from the protected perspective of the microvisor. So that's benefit one. We get to use every endpoint as a sensor at a very granular basis for everything that runs. Second, the moment I close that document or the tab of my browser, one instruction on the CPU, the whole thing gets zeroed out, and so it self-remediates, which is awesome. So users never need to worry about it. So even if I have CryptoLocker, it's just a don't care. Okay, so the system becomes self-protecting and self-remediating by design. Now we take those forensic fragments, which are centralized to the SOC, and we then go and search every other endpoint in the enterprise to see if we can see this thing anywhere else. And we have excruciating details. So we see things that are not typically on people's blacklists and so on. And so my PC, which is an unprotected Windows 7 system that has never been patched, running legacy Java and legacy Flash, protects itself on an unprotected network, just with hardware. It's very cool. We do this one other thing with SGX, which is worth pointing out, because SGX gives me the ability to further protect user credentials on the operating system by encrypting them in user mode in an SGX enclave, so that even if the system somehow got corrupted by malware, that those high-value credentials, and you could put other stuff in there too, cannot be stolen and dumped and used to go further into the enterprise.
Yeah, the way I see it is that Bromium is really providing me with three key features. The first is endpoint isolation. The second point is application security. If one of my applications gets breached, if it gets owned, if there's malware, if there's a crypto locker on it, I just kill it and it's done. It doesn't affect anything else because it doesn't have visibility to anything else. Right. But the third part, and this is the part that really excites me, is this idea that every endpoint, every application, every micro VM that is brought up gives my enterprise just a little bit more data. If I see an attack that starts to hit 5, 10, 20, 100 of my endpoints, I know this is something that I need to start warning my users about.
Correct. These detailed forensics are fabulous because in general the security team is wondering who's attacking them, and malware changes so quickly it lasts today less than a minute. And so we get these detailed forensics which allow us to go and look for signs of execution elsewhere in the enterprise environment, which are extraordinarily valuable, and that automates the entire kill chain analysis and remediation response on the part of the enterprise. So you don't have people sifting through essentially a haystack of alerts. First of all, there are no false alerts here. I want to be very clear, there are no false alerts. Why? Because we wait until it's arbitrarily bad. So we know it's bad, and then we get all this detail, and then we can go and automate the process of response.
That just sounds like a toy chest for every system admin out there. Now, I know you mentioned that it uses SGX, which means it's only going to work on Skylake and later processors. So when do you expect to start to see this technology, Bromium, really making it into the market?
So actually, let's be very clear. We use whatever hardware is available. So on an all I want is something which is a Core i3 or i5, 5 years old or newer. On a Skylake system, which is the one I happen to have here, where I do have SGX, we discover that and use it, okay? But we also discover other features on the CPU that the operating system may not be able to support. So for example, Windows 7 doesn't support SMEP or DEP, okay? And we use those also to protect the system. But basically we have an ability, because we have privileged software, it's a hypervisor, to dig down and arbitrarily take the security goodness from the platform and use it to benefit software security. There is another key benefit which may not have been clear. I might be required in an enterprise environment to use legacy software. So I'm using Java 7 here because that's tied to Oracle ERP 11. There's no escaping it. And so users are sometimes tied into using unpatchable or unupgradable stuff, and they can do that quite safely.
Simon, thank you very much for speaking with us. Thank you for sharing this technology. If they wanted to find out more about Bromium, maybe if they wanted to find out where they could talk to someone to potentially deploy it in their network, where can they go?
I'm Simon at bromium.com, Bromium, or you can go to www.bromium.com.
Thank you again. And folks, if you're looking to protect something really, really big, Bromium suggests you use something really, really small.